So I'll be speaking to us quickly. We'll be doing a quick review together of the World Economic Forum's, future jobs reports, the 2023 edition. This report usually comes out every 2 years. And last year was the latest edition came out last year, and I hyperlinked it here. So just people who are interested in just like reading more about this from this conversation, you can click on this. You see all of the previous versions. I think they began this report in 2016, and they've been producing it ever since. The next report I think comes out next year in 2025. So we'll be reviewing basically what the report says. It's kind of bulky document, so I'm not going to go into too much details, but I've picked out the major highlights from the report, what I think concerns us as young people, what are the skills we should be building, and how can those skills be relevant to current realities following how fast the world is moving, whether it's AI or chat GPT, all of this, buzzwords that we're hearing. How can we ensure that our work and our skills remain relevant in this new unfolding world? So that's basically what we'll be talking about. And then I'll just share a bit of my story as well. And and then we'll take questions. So if we go right into it, I think that before we talk about the future skills, right, I think it's very important to first understand the times. So there have been 4 industrial revolutions so far, and every industrial revolution has sort of dictated what happened during that time of its occurrence. So in the first industrial revolution, which goes as far back as 1784, according to historians, this was when we figured out mechanical production. So steam power engine, all of those steam trains. We learned that if you burn charcoal, it creates some kind of energy to power machines. It was dirty, was frugal, right? But it was still some form of energy, right? Because we were able to like create some kind of thing out of it, and that's when the invention of the train, movements of cargo, all of those kind of things began. Prior to this time, it was mostly cars, right? It was mostly very basic forms of cars, or people would use animals to do agriculture and stuff like that, right? But you see how as technology advances, every other sphere of life advances too as well, right? So by 1870, when electricity was, I won't say invented, discovered, right? When electricity was discovered, but electricity has always been there. It's in the fish, it's in so many things around us, it's in lightning, right? But when it was discovered and changed from AC to DC, where we could use it in a small scale way, that also changed everything. Electricity now became like a thing that helped us power machines better. It became cleaner. It wasn't as dirty as, because I don't know if you've been where they burn coal. If they burn coal, there's that dust ash thing that's usually out there. It's usually very, very dirty. It has like terrible health implications. So electricity made things a bit more cleaner. During the electricity era, which is the second industrial revolution, we also then had like the assembly line. So how you have that conveyor belt that has it's like a machine that produces different things, like it produces different versions of one thing. So if you want to produce, like for example, bread, like you have a machine that has like makes like 100 breads every day, for example, right? Electricity made all of that possible. And for a very long time, that was like the highest form of invention and the highest form of technology. So if you go all the way back to like 1960s, 1969, 1970-ish, I think we got into the third industrial revolution in that era because, computers became a thing, right? So computers, invention of electronics. Before now, computers were really huge, but now they became smaller and smaller and smaller. And then you had crazy people like Steve Jobs and co who started thinking of ways to make them even way smaller to like, something you can hold in your hand, something you can use to play music, iPods, they started thinking of all those kind of smaller things. And so that became the revolution that we were in up until, most people say up until 2020. So between 1969 and 2020, for a large part, we were in the third industrial revolution. It was mostly about automated production, electronics, computers. So there's so much electronics, like games and, like there's small versions of so many things, right? And they were physical things. Now, in the fourth industrial revolution, which is the revolution that we're currently in, we've moved from the internet now to the digital world. I mean, so this is like a more advanced version of the internet. So the internet is great because it was connecting us together. But now we move from just being connected by computers, right, to the point where we're almost like experiencing ourselves in that digital world. So things like artificial intelligence, robotics, virtual reality, data, all of these things have become like the leading thing. So just as you used to have electricity and have gears and have, the internet and electronics, the chip and all those things lead advancement back in those other industrial revolutions. In our own era now, these are the things that would lead. It's AI, it's big data, it's robotics, it's VR, it's HR or whatever. So many arrows, right? And I guess the question usually is, how does it affect me? Does it mean I have to then start learning how to code, learning how to, becoming a techie. If I'm, for example, if you're like an expert now, like Nicholas, in the food system space, doesn't mean you just abandon food systems now and learn AI and learn how to do everything differently. No, because the world doesn't even like, if we all leave our various careers to go into tech, who would treat us when we're sick? Who would give us food? Who will help us find out the discoveries in food science as Nicholas is currently doing? Who would read the news on TV? Who would, so there's so many things, right? That there's so many sectors that actually need to be, filled. However, the question often is, how would the question you should be asking rather is, how would this industrial revolution affect my sector? How would it affect my own field? What ways will it disrupt it? How can I position myself in a way that I'm a leader in that disruption and not just like a collateral damage? Because there'll be so much collateral damage. So people will just like when they wake up and not have jobs. But how do you ensure that you're not just like you just find out, but like you're actually studying and learning and being ahead of the curve when it comes to all of those things? So yes, I took some time to explain this just so you understand this for sure, because this is quite central. And I'll explain to you why this is central, especially from the World Economic Forum perspective. So this is how, just giving you some examples of how the industrial revolutions also show in how like human communication has evolved. If you see from like first industrial revolution, right, it was gears and steam engines and like very basic form of engineering. And if you look at how our communication and the way we've communicated as human beings, how it has evolved as well. If you go as far back as like 550 BC, you have like the very first postal office in Persia, in the ancient land of Persia, where they had the postal office and they had wall carvings. For them that was technology then. And then by 1891, we had radio, first very primitive and then became more advanced. Now radio is online, like people can listen to radio online. But before now, you needed like a radio set you raise your antenna up and before you're able to catch signals. And then we had Bell Graham do the telephone. And then there was the first form of email in 1966. This was again in the third industrial revolution. And then most of the other parts of the evolution of communication happened a lot in the third industrial revolution because you had ARPANET, which was the first form of internet. And then you now had a lot of things there moving really fast, like listservs there growing up. We had Wikipedia in 2001, Facebook in 2003, 2006, you had Twitter. Now you have podcasts and TikTok and all of these things that are moving really, really fast. And it has in many ways like changed the way we communicate from just like, talking to ourselves only by, I'm sure before telephones, it was letters, right? They send letters. And before we used to have all these birds that fly from place to place to drop out all these messages, right? But you've gone from there now, and the bird you think of now is Twitter. It's Twitter that's like the bird now, right? Where you have people send messages to themselves. So yeah, so as the revolutions changed, like technology also like evolved the way we communicated. And you can see that across every field of humanity, even in agriculture as well. If you go all the way back to like 9,000 BC, we were using sticks to dig holes, and then when I'm sure the person that discovered how to use animals to like make plow would have been like an inventor in his time, right? Because like, oh my God, you can use animals to dig holes. That must have felt like he was a very strong inventor, because I'm sure if he sees all the things that we're doing now in agriculture, it's meant to be blown, right? Because after then, there have been like irrigation. Ancient Egypt did a lot of like work on automated irrigation where they will use wheels to irrigate like large lands of farms, right? And then the tractor then came, which was like a huge, achievement with the 18th century. Tractor being able to reach a lot of people, and with machine, you don't have to dig anymore, you just drive, and it helps you to do all those harvesting and everything. And then you had the combined harvester. Sometime in the 20th century, we now started like looking for ways to make crops grow faster. So like you had agrochemicals growing, you had us trying to figure out ways to do pesticides and stuff like that. And then by 2000, we started thinking of how we can modify the food. So GMOs came about, and then after that, I started thinking of like, how do we use satellites to even like measure weather patterns? How do we know that it would rain for sure at this particular time? And then so we started thinking of that way. Now people are thinking of using greenhouses that are fully automated, like even like, I'm sure Nicholas can tell you a bit more about this, but even like, before, how in poultry, like before my parents used to have a poultry farm, I would go and like physically bring out the eggs. But now, like, there are conveyor belts that as the egg drops, the conveyor belt moves it to the next thing and the next level and the next level. Everything's moving really fast, right? So as technology advances, again, things continue to move. You can see that as well in real estate as well. Real estate, again, shows you a good example. From the way we used to live before in smaller houses, now we're building up. Most people are building very high. Currently, with Internet of Things, houses now are like living beings, right? Houses can sense your feeling. Like you can come back from work and your house can feel that you're sad and can start playing certain songs and can start putting on the coffee for you and putting on your favorite show on TV. Everything is now connected. So yeah, I mean, just again, underscoring what I said earlier about technology impacting everywhere. So think about your sector, whatever it is you're doing, whatever you're working in. Technology also has over time impacted that and moved it further. And it's not going to stop. It's going to keep moving further. So the question rather is, how do you put yourself in a place where you're very, you have a vantage point, so that you can leverage knowledge and leverage tools to be able to push yourself further and be a leader in your own sector, as opposed to being, again, like I've used this word over and over, as opposed to being collateral damage, someone who just gets lost. So to summarize the fourth industrial revolution, which was the beginning part, I spent some time here to explain this, because this lays the foundation for what I want to talk about. First industrial revolution is mechanical. The second is electrical. The third is the internet, because that's when we figured out the internet. And the fourth is digital. And with digital, you can see like there's so much connection, right? There'll be a lot of like there's a lot in the virtual world, right? People are doing like avatars now and having an avatar phase and those kind of things, right? So there'll be so much happening in that space. I think it's basically just knowing how we can be pioneers in that space. Because most times in Africa, we're often the ones that receive all these things last. It's almost like the whole world figures it out, and then they're like, oh, those people in Africa just dump something to them. So let's donate some computers to them, and then we figure everything out towards the end, and the world has already moved on. And at that phase, we usually don't have we're not able to lead the world in anything at that point, because people have figured it out and they moved on already. So it's how do we ensure we can figure these things out and lead the world, right? In everything that we're basically doing. Can you guys hear me? Can you still hear me? Just to be sure. Did my internet break at some point?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes, we can hear you. But honestly, I wanted to suggest that you should do this once in a while, like just to carry us along. But then we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, I will. I'll try to. Yes, I'll try to do that. Okay, thanks. Okay, so that's the foundation I wanted to set before we go into the reports. I also wanted to share as well that, so like between 2015 and 2017, right, WEF had been, so as far back as almost 7-8 years ago, WEF had been talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And I actually forgot to hyperlink this, but I'm going to send it to the team so they can share. Okay, I'm going to send this to the team so they can share with you guys. But it's the first book that was written on fourth industrial revolution. It was written by the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and this was in 2016. And he, as far back as then, he is interested to imagine and see what that digital world is going to be like. And he has started to make predictions already about what will happen in this. Some of them have come to pass. Some of them are still not come to pass. But just talking about the role technology is going to play in our respective lives, I think that's a book that if you have some time, it would be good for you to check it out. And I'm happy to share that with the team to be able to share that with you guys. So so since then, there's been so much conversation about the revolution and what a first industrial revolution world would look like. I got the chance. I have and like I was saying, I mean, it's been a long time that these predictions have basically happened. And like I said, I think it's going to be a good book for you to read, because he emphasizes a lot on young people and how young people do not get left behind and how they can be sort of leaders of this, because people always say about young people being the leaders of tomorrow and leaders of the future, etc., right? But it never happens. So how can young people through the industrial revolution become leaders in these spaces, leaders of the companies and the ideas and the innovations that would lead this particular revolution? So in 2015, I think that was the first time I actually got in touch with the World Economic Forum. I got a chance to travel to, I think it was in Cape Town in 2015, for the WEF meeting. That was the 25th anniversary of the WEF meeting in Africa. So we had like all the African presidents and all those people around there. And it was a really great experience, talking about, because at the time I was working in the media. So most of the work I was doing was around how African media platforms, media organizations can disruptions. And most of that disruption has already happened because like I leaned on my experience from leading a particular newspaper organization in River State at the time, who were in print. And I just finished journalism school then, and I told the founder that, I know that you guys are in print now, you're selling maybe like 100,000 copies or something every week. But I think that in a few years, people wouldn't buy print anymore. And that with digital being bigger, it's important for you to start having like, this was 2012, 2013. It's important for you to start thinking of having like, like online platforms, websites, and Facebook and all those things, so you can begin to have an online presence. And they took me seriously for a while, right? I was like digital editor for a while. They took me seriously for a while. They wasn't turning in a lot of money at the first instance, and I think before I left, to start making maybe like 100 to 100K a month or something like that, from online adverts and stuff like that. But now, I mean, I'm sure if they could see me now, they'd be like, oh my God, you were right. Because now everybody has gone digital. Like even the big media platforms in Nigeria have also gone digital. So yeah, so that was one of the things I was on this panel discussing. And yeah, I also got to write about this as well. You can also read a bit more about it if you care to hear more about this. Yeah, in 2016, I also became the head of the Global Shapers community in my city, in Port Harcourt. So yeah, so I got the chance to go to Geneva. I met Schwab himself and many other leaders, obviously. I think at the time it was late Professor Dora Akoyili's daughter. Her name is Chidiogo Akoyili, who was the head of the forum. So she really made sure that she like mainstreamed so many young Nigerians in that space, being able to reach out to all these leaders and being able to share ideas as well. So yes, it was a really wonderful experience. But beyond the experience, I think one thing that I've seen about WEF over the years, because now I'm in the expert network, right? One thing I've seen about WEF over the years is that like WEF sort of loves to be a pioneer in thinking, right? Which is why I think this report makes sense. When I saw the topic, I was happy about it because like we often do not read these in quotes projections, or maybe if you're a church person, prophecies, they call it prophecies. These things that people often say, people, especially people who know how the world works, often say. And if you're not in tune with what's happening, you sort of just get lost, right? And I think that's what happens to us a lot in our part of the world. Things are already moving really fast, and we often just get lost. So how do we ensure that we're able to lead the world and be able to show that we can actually solve problems? And I think that this report sort of like points out so many things that we can pick out. So now I'll go straight into the report. I picked out the top 10 skills. I picked out some important highlights from the reports. Then we'll talk about the skills and how we can build this, top 10 skills of the future. And then I think that's when after that time, I then share my story, and then we take questions after that. So just one quick highlight from the report that I think is very important, and I found this quite interesting, is that the report pointed out that 44% of workers' core skills are expected to change in the next 5 years. So between 2023 and 2028, almost half of the skills that you currently have will be irrelevant. I was like, what? When I read, I was like, what do you mean? So all the things I'm learning currently, do you mean that I will need to keep learning more? And in the report, some examples were given in the retail sector. They talk about Amazon, the work Amazon is doing now, thinking about like even using like AI and robotics to do deliveries and drones and stuff like that. And how some of these things were tested during COVID. So yeah, how strong that statement is, it makes you think that it means that I really cannot say I have stopped learning. You know how like in school in Nigeria, right, when you finish like a bachelor's program, maybe your master's, you're like, yes, I'm done. Or if what's best case scenario, do like your PhD, you're like, oh my God, like I've done the highest point of learning. And so like now done, ready for this world. What the report says is that you really cannot be done. You really are not really done, because of how fast things are changing and because of how much like knowledge would keep becoming obsolete really fast. You need to like remain on your A game, studying, learning that, and that's why it's a great thing you're part of this kind of program, right? Because it keeps your mind sharp. You're learning, you're listening. What is the latest thing in my sector? What's the latest thing in my field? Who are the best people? Following them on LinkedIn, listening to what they're doing, reading what they're sharing, because that's the only way you can keep yourself very, very updated. So this is one striking thing. And I'm sure as things evolve, like 2025, 2026, we'll see more of this, as your skills needing to change. The skills you used to use before, you need to actually upgrade your skills really fast to catch up with the times. Another point that came out from the report is that so COVID-19 pushed many companies to think a lot about digitization. And it's very obvious for us in Nigeria, right? Like before COVID, I'm sure remote work before COVID would be like 25% or like even 18%. But post-COVID, almost 50% of organizations have started, if not more, really, have started thinking about like remote work, how they can hybrid work, how they can sort of think of ways where they can digitize their processes so that everything is not like paper-based. So there are many organizations during COVID where, because most things were paper-based, you needed someone to sign the paper to get approvals, and it was a mess. I worked with an organization that they were actually trying to, I think they're trying to like get funding to support like COVID relief efforts, but most of their processes were analog. Like almost everything was analog. So there was a time when we actually had to get approval to physically go to because we couldn't fly, right? So we physically went to one of their partner offices in Port Harcourt where they could print paper, and then we printed on there, we signed something. Like it was all analog, right? But I'm sure like now they're everything else, because again, that was one of the findings from that period, that they had to think differently. So you have a situation. Can you guys hear me?
Which is good, guys, that what's called it's you like this.
Can you guys hear me? Is it me or can I hear someone?
Can you mute yours? Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you. I think someone is taking the
Someone was speaking. Okay, sure. Okay, so yeah, so what I was saying is about 83% of companies from the report are saying that they are scaling into remote work. Many organizations are scaling to remote work. In fact, since 2021, I've been working remotely. All the organizations that I've worked with since 2021 have all been remote. Maybe I see my colleagues maybe like once in a year or something like that. But it's all been fully remote. Most people are moving to remote work, thinking of ways where they can use the digital space to do all of the work that they do, coordinate. Like be frugal with their finances. Many also have accelerated to digitalization, 84%, taking most parts of it. Well, so about 50% of them are thinking, how do we automate our processes so that there's no like too much human interaction, which is nice, but also has a downside because it means that they also like let go of many people. Because if they automate every single process, or most of the processes, people who used to like be in charge of those processes wouldn't have jobs anymore, right? So yeah, so that's a reality that the report shows us, that somehow COVID-19 has sort of like pushed us. I mean, COVID was a very negative time. It was terrible, right? So it was a terrible time, to be honest. Like many terrible things happened. Many people lost their jobs. Many people were going through a lot of difficult times. Even when like relief came to like Nigeria, politicians stole it, like hiding Indomie, like it was a very terrible time, right? But I think that if you can look at COVID and just think of anything that COVID led to, one of the things that COVID had really like pushed the world to get to is the fourth industrial revolution, because we've now started thinking beyond how the world used to be before. We're thinking more digital, and how do we make the world, a more digital place and make things more effective. So that's something from the report. One other thing that is interesting that you see from the report is they also talk about the fastest growing and the fastest declining jobs based on data that has been done. I think across, they even did Africa to this as well. So across Africa, Asia, and then of course Europe, America, and Australia or Oceania, they did like a sort of like a survey to find out what jobs are people leaving and what jobs are people jump into. I mean, number one, obviously AI for fastest growing job, AI machine learning specialists. seems to be a role that is really, really moving fast. Sustainability specialists as well, because of climate change, because like it's become obvious to us that we need to really solve the problem of climate change. So you have a lot of sustainability specialists as well growing, or companies thinking of how to like integrate sustainability into their own work. They have business intelligence analysts, you have information security analysts, fintech engineers, data analysts, and operators, electrotechnology engineers, etc., etc. Now for the declining jobs, one of the most declining jobs according to them is you have like people who do like door-to-door sales work and like news and street vendors. So again, because this is a developed world thing, right? So maybe the rate might be slower for us in Nigeria compared to abroad. But like for most of the door-to-door roles in abroad, I mean, you have most of those roles like going away. There are hardly like any advertisements for employment in those roles. The one that shocked me even was that you have even like people who do accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll clerks. I was shocked because like I thought like, I mean, that's still a really cool thing, right? That's still a huge thing, especially also in Nigeria, like there's ICANN and all those things. But many tech companies are now building solutions that sort of like you have a software that's an accountant for you basically, right? So if someone just buys a software, they don't need to hire accountants. You automate the entire processes, keeps their books, etc., etc. So that's also something we should keep in mind as well. So you have data entry clerks as well, postal service clerks as well. I mean, Nigeria, postal service has really never worked. I mean, it used to work before in the past. So like, I always not because of like decline. It's just like it just hasn't really worked. So, but yeah, that's a role abroad that is slowly moving away because again, the services when it comes to like delivery of stuff is becoming a lot more advanced, and people like Amazon and Co are really taking into that space. People are rather just buying a lot of things, right? So delivery mechanisms are becoming a lot more advanced. So yeah. So this is this is top growing jobs and top declining jobs. They talk a lot. They write a lot about each of these jobs in the reports, and explain why why they think these fastest growing jobs are sort of the roles where you're having a lot more people go into that space, and why these other ones are declining. And so yeah, that's just one thing from the report that you should also look at. And finally, just to highlight from the reports is that they then, which I think this is very important for the session, they then go on to talk about the top 10 skills that they think will be relevant between 2023 and 2027. And they think that these skills are important not just for like businesses, but for even governments, for small businesses, like just like organizations generally, for any enterprise, organization, entity rather, to be able to function and for you to be able to like fit as a professional. They also highlighted young people and talked about the education sector. What kind of skills should young people be gaining, as young people? What kind of skills should we be looking out for? And what kind of skills will make us relevant globally, not just like in our own countries, but if you want to work globally in a global organization, how would you be able to fit in there? And what kind of skills would you be able to use? So these are the top 10 skills: analytical thinking, creative thinking. These two fall under cognitive skills, number 1 and 2. Then number 3, 4, 5, and 7 are under self-efficacy skills. So this is resilience, flexibility and agility, motivation and self-awareness, curiosity and lifelong learning, and dependability and attention to detail. This is number 7. They mentioned this a bit, stressing on the fact that like many employers, they're saying that there's a shortage of people who they can depend on, right? Like dependability, like who can you really like, can you hire someone that you can say this person, if I give you this task, I can go to sleep, I know that you're going to deliver on it. Many employers sort of like, I think like 70% of them, or 40% of them said that they're having a shortage of dependable people. It's not like you don't know what you're doing, but like, are you dependable to deliver things to the very end? I think that's also something that's very lacking as well in our space in Nigeria. So that's something as well that is important. So those are self-efficacy skills, and there's management skills, that's quality control. Then there's technology skills, which is technological literacy. I'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, you have people skills, which they call working with others. That's number 8 and 9. Empathy and active listening, and leadership and social influence. So these 10 skills, I mean, I was shocked because I thought that when I thought about like first industrial revolution, I was thinking they would just say like, I don't know, like AI, like robotic skills, or I was shocked that they put all of that into one item, which is technological literacy. I was thinking you say a lot more about like IT stuff, but shockingly, the things that people are actually looking for are people who are dependable, people who are creative, people who are curious, people who put attention to detail, people who are leaders, self-led people who can motivate themselves, who are resilient. These are things that are soft skills, right? So people might not think are really important, but I mean, shockingly, these are the important things that employers out there are basically looking out for. So we'll go right now to talk about how skip for 3. So we can talk about how we can build these skills of the future. And then then I'll share my story and then we can ask questions. But yeah, these are the 10 skills again of 10 skills of the future, or top 10 skills of 2023 as the World Economic Forum calls it. So the first group of skills, and I remember, like I said, they grouped them into 5 different groups: cognitive, self-efficacy, management, technology, and people skills. So the first is cognitive skills. So these 2 skills, they sound similar, but they're actually not similar. So the first is analytical thinking. Can you guys hear me? Just to be sure you can hear me before I go right into this. You can? Okay, good.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so first analytical thinking, and then there's creative thinking. So analytical thinking, the difference is this. Analytical thinking actually refers to the ability to look at information, whether it's quantitative or quantitative information, and discern patterns within the information. So it could be numbers, or it could be like stories or text, like volumes of text, like reports or whatever. Do you understand? Like what I just done now, helping you to look at the reports and picking out elements of the report is analytical thinking, right? I mean, I feel like I'm special, right? Because I have analytical thinking skills. But so I've been able to help you guys. So that's an example of what analytical thinking is. So you can read something, read an information, listen to something, hear something else, and tell them that, okay, these are the high points of this particular thing. That's usually analytical thinking. It's either numbers or text. But creative thinking actually is, so analytical is like, this is there and I'm looking at it. But creative thinking actually is, how do I bring out something that's not even there? So you look at the problem, it relates more to problem solving. Look at the problem and say, how do I get a solution to this particular problem? It might be an adaptation of a solution that already exists in another place. It might be a solution that just comes out of the blues generally, just like it has never been done in this world. I mean, it's hard to find things that have never been done in this world, but yeah, it's possible to think of things that have never been done. Maybe it's never been done in your own field before, right? Or it could also just be something we've done before, but we just didn't do it right. How do we just like tweak something in it and make it better so that it begins to solve the problem that we're trying to solve eventually. So yeah, so they also call this like creative problem solving. It's very valuable. It's something that most employers are looking for. They want to, like, in your CV, even like in your resume, one thing that will make you always stand out, and this is a tip I've been able to learn so far from being on a number of panels. People often want to hear, they just don't want to hear, oh, I worked in this organization, I use Microsoft Excel, I use Microsoft Word, and they're like, I mean, who gives a damn about those things? They want to hear, help the organization save XYZ amount of money, grew the company by XYZ number of percentage, like something that leads to something. Do you understand? Like, helped so number of people do so number of things. Like, just something that shows that you can solve problems. People are in their need of, problem solvers. And I think that's something that's a wonderful skill that we can all develop. So just a couple of tips that I was able to find out there. This is not exhaustive. There's a lot more tips out there, but these are a couple of tips I can find out there for how you can boost creativity. And I think one of the first ones, this first one on carving out time, so it sounds very mundane, right? Like just a carve out time to think, right? But I think that's something that we hardly, because of just adulting and adult life and all the hustle and everything, right? It's sometimes very difficult to just like pause and say, I want to think. I want to just stop and think, right? But that's actually very important. Organizations actually will pay strategists to actually just like think for them. How do I think about solutions to this problem? And it's important to stop, because if you don't stop, the truth is, for your brain to get to the stage where you can just like be inspired and in that kind of half asleep, half awake mood where you're thinking, your subconscious is moving and everything, it needs you to actually pause. You cannot be doing it when you're like walking around and doing something or typing in an email or something like that. You understand? So so carve out time for creative project. Think about them. Maybe have a day every week where you say, Mondays are my thinking days, and you stick to Mondays. Every Monday, for example, you say, as I come out from work, or even like maybe on your way to work, maybe you put in like music as you're driving to work or something. Maybe someone's driving you there. You put in music in your ear. You can listen quietly, and that takes you to a particular realm where you can think about problems and try to note down the solutions. That's also something that is quite useful. Another thing is seeking inspiration from like new insights, experiences, travel, when you like, I don't know, go for holiday, go for a program somewhere, go to another country. One of the things like, in Nigeria, people use travel as a way to brag, right? But like travel, one of the important things about travel is that it exposes you to many systems that you don't see every day, right? Like to things that people are doing things differently everywhere around the world. But when you travel, you see that, so people can actually do this thing differently, and it's actually giving them particular results, And you might be looking at just traffic, for example, and you're getting ideas for something that's just like, I don't know, machine learning or something completely different, right? And that's how inspiration often works. So seek out inspiration. Even if you don't travel, look at YouTube sometimes, just like search things on YouTube. I don't know, whatever it is you're looking for, whatever field it is, maybe even look for like art or something, or buildings, or just something. Just look out for something different, because that's actually a way to break out that monotonous thinking. Creativity doesn't come from like monotonous things. It comes from being able to be free, like to free your mind and open up your mind to stuff as well. You can also use like flowcharts. I used to use flowcharts a lot when I'm brainstorming. You just write a word in the middle of the page, and then just like draw lines to other words that connect to that. Whatever comes to your mind, just write. It can be nonsense, it can be correct. Just write everything that comes to your mind. After some time, take some time to just look at those ideas and see whether there's anything useful in those ideas. Keep asking questions. I mean, we hate Nigeria, we sort of like punish people that ask questions, but we actually should encourage people to ask questions. What if? What if questions? We always say, oh, don't be pessimistic. No, be pessimistic. Ask questions. Ask those questions that seem like they are good, terrible questions, because that's actually how you'll be able to test your idea across every variable. Is this possible? Would it work? Would it not work? What if this happens? What if that happens? Ask questions, take risks, and also remember that you're going to make mistakes. We often, I think that's also because how school has conditioned all of us. We often think that your first attempt should be perfect, like just get it, just like do it and get it straight, like done, But most times when it comes to like solving problems, that's not often how we have, right? Even people who design and develop the best things in the world, inventions and all those things, they tell you that they feel like they keep failing over and over and over until they figure the thing out, right? So I mean, it's fine. Try it. As far as it's not a life-threatening situation, try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. You will learn from it. It becomes a way for you to keep growing in that particular thing. So these are some of the skills, some of the tips that I found useful when it comes to boosting creativity. For me, I also find so much inspiration in nature as well. So there's a growing field of science called biomimicry. In 2022, I think I got globally certified to be a biomimicry practitioner. And in biomimicry, we often look at nature as a form of mentor, like a natural mentor, right? If you believe in God, God designed nature in a very perfect way. Every single thing has a use. Like every single thing that exists, like anything from the sand on the ground to the, I don't know, sky, the clouds, every single thing you see around you has use. And as far back as the 1970s and 80s, people have been using biomimicry to solve a lot of problems. So if you look at the right picture, so in Japan now has some of the fastest trains in the world, right? They've advanced very, very far. But before you had this sharp mouse edge train, the long nose train, which is the bullet train. They used to have a normal train. You know how trains are like a box, right? And because they have a huge population in Tokyo and they want to like move them around Japan for work and everything, they would have to pass through like tunnels. The train track goes through tunnels and everything. And whenever it goes through a tunnel, because normal block design of the train goes against like air molecules in the tunnel. So it goes from one area of density to another area of density. So when it comes out of the tunnel, there's a huge boom sound that comes out like a bomb. It sounds like a bomb, really, like boom, sounds like a bomb. So every time the train is going, every day, there's that boom sound that always comes up. So they tasked a team in Japan to design a better train that stops this sonic, it's called the sonic boom. How do you stop this sonic sound that comes up? And funny enough, one of the persons that the lead engineer, he's a bird watcher, and he's always liked this bird called the kingfisher. And the kingfisher always he's a bird that hunts, right? So how can a bird that goes from the air go into water to hunt and come out, without making as much noise? Because if the bird splashes, the fish is going to hunt, would know and run away, right? So how does it go in there skillfully, makes least noise and the least disturbance, and gets the fish and comes out and goes? How does that work? So that's how he got inspiration. He looked at the kingfisher, studied the kingfisher for so many months, And yeah, and that's how they changed their train from being a box shape to a long nose shape. And aerodynamics wise, he figured out the problem, and there was no more sonic boom, and that helped them to, of course, now all of their trains are built like this, but they've also done like faster trains that can go very far distances in a very short time. Same thing with Velcro as well. Like those of us who used to use, I think bags have it. If you also use, for those who wear my generation, if you use like keto sandal also has all those things where you can clip it and open it. It doesn't need any glue. It's an adhesive, but doesn't need any kind of glue or any kind of liquid to make it stay. And the designer for this is a Swedish guy. He got inspiration from this plant. It's called the ball. He went out with his dog for like the evening walk, and then came back and found out that these things are like sticking to his dog's, fur. And it seemed really strong. Right? He was wondering, how like there's no adhesive, but it's really strong on the dog's fur. It took him like a couple of hours to remove all of them from his dog, and he figured out and said, what if we do something like that for our clothes, where we don't really need to use belts and stuff, but we can fasten and unfasten easily. Yeah, and that's how Velcro was born. And there's so many inspirations across the world, really, all over the world, across Africa, across Europe, across Asia. People look at nature, but you don't have to look at nature alone. There are just many others. I'm just giving you like this example to show you that even like in grass and birds, people find inspiration. So you can find inspiration anywhere, in anything. From watching what people are doing, from seeing other people's solutions as well, you also find inspiration as well as an individual. So yeah, so these are some strategies for overcoming creative stagnation. Take breaks. That's very key. To be honest, I personally used to be like one of the people who used to break this law very well, because I feel the harder you work, the more you're closer to the solution, right? But the thing is, once you've gotten to the stage where you're not figuring things out, that's a sign that you're overwhelmed, or that's a sign that you need to take a break. For us, we feel like we need to work harder, but no, actually, it means take a break, recharge. Take a 2 day off, take a 1 day off, do something. I don't know, listen to music, just like change that rhythm that you're in, and before you know, ideas will definitely come about with you. Collaborate with others as well. Ask questions. People who have done it before, find out what they've done, how they're able to do it. Engage in creative exercises, seek inspiration, and embrace a change of scenery. So like move around. I don't know, like leave your house, go somewhere else. We can go for like a short camp or something. I know insecurities in Nigeria now, so it's tough to move around very well. But yeah, change scenery, like change location. Sometimes all of those kind of things helps you. If you're sleeping in the room, sleep in the living room for some time. That changes your mind and helps you to get into that creative space a lot more. So yeah, and I'm sure you guys might have a few more tips. So when we open up this thing for discussion, feel free to also share some of the tips you use for your creativity work as well. Okay, so I've done the first one, which is analytical and creative thinking. Those are under the cognitive skills. Reminder, those are under the cognitive skills. The second one I'm doing now is the self-efficacy skills. And this self-efficacy skills, this is the highest number of skills along that list. It's a list of 10, but there are 4 skills that cover under self-efficacy skills, which actually means that when all is said and done, no matter how much technology really grows, right? What will be most important is actually your own development, your personal development, how much self-discipline you have, how much you can motivate yourself, how curious you are. Are you curious to actually keep learning and asking questions and unlearning and relearning? So yeah, so that's actually one thing that stood out for me from reading the reports. That actually, yes, when all is said and done, your personal development really, really matters. So these 4 self-efficacy skills, I always tend, and they actually mentioned this in the book as well, in the reports, these skills actually fall under self-development as an individual. So staff development, they talk about how organizations should make it culture to be able to like push staff to develop themselves, and also as young people as well, how the education sector needs to be able to think about ways where these kind of soft skills are added to the curriculum and for us to learn as well. And so I usually cover this under like self-discipline, because for you to be able to motivate yourself, to be resilient when things are not working, to be flexible, to be agile, to even change, even like when you find out that this is not working, change. Like don't just stay forever and ever but do the same thing. You figure that it's actually not going to work, change, adapt things, be willing to move things around. Self-awareness actually refers like self-discovery as well. So I just put all of these things under self-discipline. And there's so many books on self-discipline, right? So I can't really like cover that in a couple of minutes. But I think that there's some tips there's some things that you should sort of like keep in mind when you think about self-discipline. Because self-discipline basically is the ability to control your own desires and impulses to ensure that you can be focused to say, I want to do this and actually do it. Time management, I mean, Nicholas would tell you, like in many advanced societies, time management is not like, it's not negotiable. Like if they say we're going at 2, we're going at 2. It's not like 2:04. Like they don't mean 2:30 or 2, but no, they mean like 2 o'clock. And the train comes at 2 and it goes at 2. Nobody's going to wait for you. They will not say, oh, Nicholas is coming from his house, so let's all stay here and wait for you. No. So they actually move on. So things around, like, you know how we say all this thing like Nigerian time, African time, all those things actually point us to lack of self-discipline. We actually need to be disciplined enough. And as a leader, for you to show self-leadership and self-discipline, it begins from time management. How do you even manage your time? How do you ensure that you allocate time for certain things, you know, and control your desires? Because sometimes you want to do certain things, but, you know, like, you'd be like, can I just do something else? You know, how do you force yourself? How do you force yourself to say, it's time for this and I want to actually do this? You know, you make yourself do it. And how do you also, because we often think about, I mean, this year is Olympics year, right? And I'm an athletics fan. I usually watch the Olympics really well. And people often see people like break records, like world records, run really fast, you know, athletics really, etc., you know, swimming and all that. And you would think that they actually has maybe like a year or 2 years of time. No, most of these guys stay rehearsing from when the day the last Olympics ended. That's when most of them begin their self-discipline program, right? Usain Bolt has said many times as well that his hardest races are during his training, and his coach would often push him so hard to the limits that sometimes he feels like he wants to die. And so whenever he comes out to run actually at the normal race, where it's like the Olympic race, it's like it's fun for him because it's like there's no coach to push me here. I'm just having fun. He'll be dancing, he'll be pointing his hand up and down because he's really having fun. Really, he has done the hard work and the self-discipline of waking up at 5 a.m. every day for 4 years to train. Do you understand? So self-discipline actually is like just picking out those, having a long goal, a long-term goal, but picking out those small steps you can take consistently daily to push yourself towards achieving things, you know. So yeah, so set small goals. That's one of the tips for self-discipline. Practice prioritization, because sometimes many things will come up at you. Sometimes you have 4 things that are important, but what is urgent? You know, as I will boss, I'll say, even this is important, but what is urgent? Who will die if you don't do something? You know, so you check out what is urgent, do the urgent things first, and then do the other important things. So prioritization is very key. Know your weaknesses as well. All of us have weaknesses. There are things that make you tired. There are certain conditions that make you not perform well. You know, like for me, if I'm doing a lot of things, right? Maybe I do like 4 days back to back of so many things. Like just as you guys said in my bio, that very ridiculous long bio. I'm the founder of Policy Shapers, so we're doing Policy Shapers work. Nicholas and I are thematic leads at the NESG. I'm currently the lead of Africa for where I work as my 9 to 5 at Nguvu Collective. So I'm leading staff across Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. And yeah, I'm also a husband and a father as well soon. So if you have these five things coming at you, you have to think that, okay, what am I prioritizing first, right? What's more urgent? But if I'm in a situation where I have to do all of these things all at the same time every day for like 3 days consistent, I know that I'm going to definitely break down. So I know that that's my personal weakness. There are people who can do this thing like for weeks and not be tired. So what I do is I then have like a prioritization list every week. I say I know I have to do all of these things every week, but what should I do that is super urgent, that has to happen? If I do this thing, I will be safer. You know, what's going to pay me first? What will help me to survive? You know, and I do those lists and have prioritization lists. I say, okay, I do Policy Shapers on Thursday or Friday, Saturday, so I have a lot more time. I do this one today, I do this one tomorrow, and that helps you to do stuff. So yeah, so having lists is very, very useful. If writing helps you, write it down. If you want to use like to-do list apps, use to-do list apps, whatever helps you, just make sure that you have something that holds you accountable. Also, I heard you guys have accountability partners. That's amazing, because like you have someone to hold you accountable. That's like very important part of self-discipline, to be honest. If you're not accountable to someone, you know, I mean, as you grow along, at some point you can hold yourself very, very strongly accountable, right? But I think at the start, it's good to have someone who can question you, like a mentor who can say, you're not doing this well, do this better. You know, I think you should do this one now. I think you should stop doing this one. I think you should start doing this one. Those kind of things kind of like help you to hold yourself accountable as a professional. So I think that's something we should keep in mind as well. Okay, so those are the self-efficacy skills. There's so many other ways to build self-efficacy, motivation. You can go to the gym, resilience, people who do exercise as well. All of those things help you. So read up a bit more on this particular area. That's my assignment for you. But yeah, these are a few skills I just shared on self-discipline. So on management skills, again, this was focused on quality control, and this is basically how do you ensure that the quality of product and service that each organization produces is of a high quality, because that's the only way we're going to survive, right? How do we ensure that, whether it's the food sector or entertainment, even like whatever sector we're in, how do we ensure that we're able to reach people at the highest quality of stuff? And I think management skills are broad. And sometimes people think of management as just like being manager alone, but I think management goes beyond just being. You can be a manager in a small group. Right? It doesn't need to be that organization. It doesn't have to be as a big level, right? Like it starts from even the smallest level. You can be manager in your family as well, right? The kind of things that you do, decisions that you make. And I think these 7 leadership skills from CEOhangout.com are very useful. One of them is effective communication. I think this is very, very important because people are not communicating. You're not communicating with your team. People don't know what they're doing. Everyone just becomes like bored, right? So how do you keep people motivated at all times? Also interpersonal skills as well. As a manager, like I told you guys before, the organization I currently work at, there's staff in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. We have different cultures, we understand things differently. And so I've had to build relationships with each of them as an individual at their different levels. Do you understand? So interpersonal skills are very important as a manager. Decision-making skills are very important because most times people are just waiting for you to say, let's do it, let's not do it, and there are usually like ramifications to say yes or no. So how do you ensure that you know when to say yes and know when to say no? That's a very important skill as well. And that also builds out of like self-efficacy, right? Being able to, how do you know, that's instinct as well. It comes out of there. Mentorship skills as well. You have to mentor people as a manager, right? How do you mentor people? How do you ensure they are organized in their work? Whether it's file organization, all those kind of things. How do you ensure there's strategic thinking as well going on through the work that you guys do? So yeah, so all of these things are things that help a manager grow at the various levels. So whether you're a manager at an organization, or you're leading an organization, or you're even like leading a team within an organization, you're already a manager. So how do you begin to build these skills? Because this is a skill that will be very useful, as wife has said in this report. Okay, number 4, and this is the penultimate one. Number 4 is technological skills or technology skills, and I think that technological literacy is quite broad, right? And I think that you can break it into like two broad categories. The first category would be what I call digital literacy skills. These are like basic digital literacy skills. And I think these are skills that even in our current world today are not negotiable, right? Like these are skills that you just need to have if you want to be able to work anywhere, right? Like you have to have it or you actually do not get a job. I think one of them is basic technology, which is like being able to use a variety of tools, being able to use a variety of devices. So can you work from your phone? Can you work from a laptop? Do you just understand Windows, or do you also know Mac? Just in case you get a new job and they give you a Mac system, you also understand that kind of operating system. Yeah, so different tools and devices. How do you understand that? I think that's like the basic first step. The second one is, are you able to demonstrate presentation skills using multimedia tools? Because like as a whatever field you're in now, because we're in a knowledge economy, you would at some point have to share knowledge somehow, whether it's with your team or within your organization, or even speaking on behalf of the organization at an external event. So how do you ensure that you're able to like use things like PowerPoint and slides and using graphics and design to be able to communicate whatever it is that you have? How do you also, are you able to use cloud computing, which is basically what we use with like Google Drive, like OneDrive, Google Drive, all those drives. Are you able to use them to access work, to store work, know how to be security compliant, understand how to also like keep things in a very like organized way, so that if anybody else, maybe if you leave the job and somebody else comes in, the guys need just like blend in because you've arranged things very, very seamlessly. That's something you should also put in mind. There's also being able to evaluate digital info. Are you able to like access information online? So they tell you find out more, do research on XYZ thing. Can you like know how to find verifiable sources or do you just ask ChatGPT and just copy and paste the answers? So yeah, so those are basically things that you have to keep in mind. Can you also know when a link, for example, is a phishing link, right? Because like with technology growing really fast, there'll be threats to digital, like all this like hacking and everything, right? So if someone sends you a link, like, oh, read this quickly and share quickly, you just like go ahead and just share without even checking if the link is correct. Is it a hacker's link? What are they talking about? Do you want to quickly open it in an incognito tab first before you share? Do you want to be sure what the link means and everything? Those are things that you should keep in mind as well. Yeah, digital citizenship. Are you also able to like behave and act appropriately online such that you can build a global network, right? Like on your LinkedIn, do you just have Nigerians there? It's not bad to have Nigerians there, trust me. But like if you look at the world from a global and digital perspective, it's possible for you to be in Nigeria and do work with people in the US and the UK and be earning in dollars, right? So are you able to build your skills and build your digital presence in a way that anybody anywhere can actually work with you? They can understand you, you can communicate with them. They don't see any threats from being associated with your own brand as an individual, and they're happy to like work with you from anywhere in the world. That's the question I always ask myself every day. So I think that's the question you should ask yourself too, because yeah, we are all digital citizens, right? And the world, there are no limits anymore in the world. The fourth point also is, can you collaborate digitally? So gone are the days when you like write a document, attach it to an email and send to someone, person edits it, attach to an email, send to you back, and then you do those back and forth things. Now everybody works on the cloud, right? Together. You're designing things together, working on reports together, I don't know, like editing emails together, etc. So are you able to work with people together like on that particular level? That's also a skill, I think, and in digital literacy that you should get. So these first 6 skills, I think, are just like basic skills that you need first to function. But I think if you want to now think of it from a futuristic lens, the next level, I think, thinking of how AI, which is what I mentioned earlier, how does AI, I don't know, like blockchain, security, data, etc., how do all of these things affect my own sector, right? And I saw this beautiful chart by Statista where they're talking about how, can you guys see me? Sorry, just to be sure you can hear me. Before I continue, I've been blabbing for a while.
Yes, perfect.
You can hear me? Okay, good, thanks. So yeah, so this chart just shows you, if you look at the green tab, it shows you what level to which AI can affect some of these various sectors. And banking is the highest, surprisingly. In the reports from WEF, they said accounting will be on the decline. But yeah, banking is the highest. Again, these are futuristic things. So it's not like I'm not telling you that if you're an accountant now you should like leave your job or anything. But yeah, begin to think about it in the light of, okay, so it means that in the future, AI might affect my own sector. Maybe not as fast as it affects them in the US, because Nigeria, we still have a long way to go in internet penetration. But how can you from now begin to prepare yourself for that particular disruption? What do you need to learn? Do you need what skills do you need to be built so you be relevant to the banks of the future that would need AI to help them automate their processes? So those are the kind of questions that you should ask. I'm not saying just go and like fire yourself or give your job. Please, these are like futuristic predictions, right? So don't think they're happening like tomorrow morning, right? But they're definitely going to happen. But just like, how can you prepare yourself? And I think that's why Nick Hub has put this together so that we can start thinking of that ourselves in that particular light and preparing ourselves for the future. So yeah, so think about it, right? Do a lot more research. I might not be able to cover every single sector, but think about it. Look at this chart. There's so many other charts out there. I talk about how AI and will affect, media, communications, energy sector, retail, healthcare, etc. How do you like put yourself at a position where you have a lot of skills in that particular space? Well, one example I often love to share is, you see what doctors are doing currently online. Like you guys know, like Apropos Doctor and Co, right? So they have found a way to sort of like domesticate, I won't say commercialize because we can't commercialize medicine, but like to sort of like put into like bits information about healthcare, right? Information that before you have to go to the hospital to hear these things. And like you have to go to the hospital, go for some hearing, healthcare, something for you to hear them. But they've made it like very accessible to anybody using like humor and skits and stuff like that, right? So that kind of person has started digitizing information already. So if a Google Doctor now has a video library of all of his videos, right, about different kinds of things. So you can just search anything like cancer or something, and videos will just pop up, right? He can, or maybe it doesn't have to be an app. So it can even just be like YouTube, right? So like paid YouTube. People can actually begin to pay for that kind of begin to
I think
understand.
we lost you already.
Oh, you guys lost me.
We lost
so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much for flagging that. I was just speaking. But yeah, I was just talking about like how
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm back now. Can you hear me? I tried to switch my connection. Let's see if it's better. Is it better?
Yes, it's better now.
Okay. Apologies. I'm almost at the end. So I'll just, in summary, I'm just trying to say, think about how all of these factors of the fourth industrial revolution will affect you, whether it's data, whether it's robotics, whatever it is. How do they all affect you, and how can you prepare for that disruption? Basically, I think that's like the summary of this particular slide. I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So, okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Okay, so the fourth one and the final, I think this is the final one. This is on people's skills, right? And I think this is also important. Again, first industrial revolution, everything is AI. So do you really need people's skills? Like, would you see people a lot because you'll be working remotely and everything? But the truth actually is that you would still, like, even when you work remotely, for example, I still like have calls with people every day, right? So like you still get to see people and talk to people. Maybe even if you don't see them physically, their video camera is on, so you get to still see them and talk to them, and you will still have like a relationship. So how do you, as you work with people, build a situation where you have empathy? Everyone always wants to talk. Even me, I'm also guilty of this most times. How do you listen more to people than just wanting to be the one to always speak? So that's active listening. How you listen, because it's when you actually listen to people that you actually know what they're saying. Sometimes you assume that you know what they want to say. so you talk before them. But how do you listen? Slow yourself down and say, let me listen to what this person is actually saying. And how do you build social influence such that if you're having a program, for example, and you say people come for this program, 1,000 people apply for it. How do you build that kind of influence? Using like, I don't know, maybe like LinkedIn or these platforms. How do you also build your leadership skills too as a young person? So that you don't need to even be a head of organization, but people can see you as a leader already because of the kind of decisions that you take, kind of things that you do, how you organize, how do you do all these kind of things. So all of this fall under people's skills. I think this is the fourth chunk of the space. Is it 4 or 5? I think this is the fifth section of that groups, the grouping for the skills of the future. And I think there's so many frameworks, guys. Heads up, there's so many frameworks for how to understand people, everything about people and everything. But I think one framework, and some of you might already know this, that I've always found quite useful in the work I've done in so many organizations has been the temperament framework, because this is quite natural, right? And the framework, if you read the book Why You Act the Way You Do by Tim LaHaye, it sort of like explains a lot about like how there are 4 broad temperaments. And as we're born with either one of these temperaments. Like it's a natural thing. We don't have to like learn it. Like it just comes to us naturally, right? And there's often like a dominant temperament and a secondary temperament. And we fall into any of this kind of box. So there's the choleric, the sanguine, the melancholic, and the phlegmatic. If you understand how, because I also encourage you to check out the book if you want. I'll see if I have a digital copy. I'll share that. But yeah, if you can buy one, to be really good. It would help you sort of know how, not just to like be mischievously reading people, right? like you understand people, but you know what would trigger certain people. So a good example is if a person is phlegmatic, or let's say a person is melancholic. Melancholic people are very intelligent. They're like the Einsteins. They are very intelligent. They think of theories. They are very organized. They're detailed. They're creative. So they often like may play several musical instruments and those kind of things. But they can also be quite discontent. They can be quite pessimistic as well. So if I have a melancholy on my team, so when I'm speaking to that melancholy, I never say to her that it's not possible to do something. Never. Because if I tell her it's not possible, she's already telling herself that it's not going to be possible. Just like every day that she wakes up. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Just to be sure. Oh, sorry. Am I clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, thanks. Okay. So yeah, so I was saying she tells herself every day that things are not possible, right? Normally. So if I know that I have a melancholy on my team and I'm discussing stuff with her, I might tell a choleric, my feelings that this thing might look really tough, and they will tell me that nothing they
I think we lost you.
So sorry, guys. I'm not sure why this rain chose today of all days to, to disturb my internet. But I hope you guys can hear me now. I've just switched back to my mobile internet because the Wi-Fi was disturbing. So if you can hear me, yes, I was just talking about if you can, my screen is still showing. I was just talking about the various temperaments and how it helps you understand how each person works and also how and what your own weaknesses are. So for me as an individual, I fall under the phlegmatic space. I'm a phleg san, so my primary temperament is phlegmatic. My secondary temperament is sanguine. So I know that my weaknesses would be first that I can be quite passive. I can sometimes be indecisive about things. I can be unambitious. So I've really forced myself to be quite ambitious about doing so many things. But my natural state is that I'm never going to do anything. I just like, yeah, I'll just do one thing and I'm fine. And I'm very, very like content. But like I force myself to really do all of these things. So when you know your weaknesses, you sort of like know what you can slack on and how you can get better on it. Right. So yeah. And then you also know your strengths, not just your weaknesses, you also know your strengths too. So like when it comes to like resolving issues, whether in my family or even at work, people always just call me and say, Eben, come and help us mediate on this, on this particular issue. I don't know why, because phlegmatics are quite diplomatic. So I'll know how to like talk to this person, calm this person down, calm that person down, make everybody to feel okay about everything, and find a like common ground solution for the issue. So yeah, so that's often how it is. So yeah, so it helps you know your strengths, help you know your weakness, and also know what your like other people's strengths and weaknesses are as well. So yeah, so like I was telling you the example of my team, I would push the hard thing to the choleric person and just like they will be that's what gives them energy. Just telling them that this thing is hard. They'll just be like, yeah, let us go there and go and conquer the land, and they will happily want to ever do those kind of things. And I'll make sure that the kind of words I use as well, I'm careful about the way I use them in talking to other certain temperaments too. So yeah, those are just the kind of ways that you sort of understand. So this is not the perfect framework, but I found like from my experience that it's quite useful in working with people because it helps you know why people are acting in a certain way. Sometimes you do something and people just like react in a certain way and you're like, why this person do this kind of thing? But if you know their temperament, you understand where they're coming from, listen to them, you will sort of understand them better. And I think that's like the first step of working with people. You need to understand people. Like you need to first know where they're coming from, know what their perspectives are, and know where they know what they mean and what they're saying, how they feel as well about certain things. And I think this framework is always quite useful. So if you can find the book, I think I will encourage you to read that book. It's quite useful in understanding the temperament framework. Yeah, so I finished the talk about, so those are tips on how I think you can share, build these skills, this top 10 skills that we spoke about earlier. And I think these are very important skills. And I think that even when the next report comes out next year, it will still speak to these skills. Like these skills are still very important in, they'll be important for forever, really. So let's continue to build these skills because, like whatever happens with the fourth industrial revolution, self-efficacy is still a big issue. There are still 4 important points here. So like your self-development and how you ensure that you're committed to self-development, and that will show through like your participation in this program, for example, in other programs that you're part of, how you commit yourself to that, would always show in your career and your work. So just my story in just like 5 minutes, and then we would take questions and we'll be done. So one of the things that I found in my own story is about how I think this is something that, something I'm quite passionate about. I always talk about it, but I think this is something that we need to like put more attention on. And I'm sure Nicholas has studied abroad, so he has a lot of education system. So education in the first industrial revolution, which is what we are currently practicing in. So sorry, can you guys hear me now? So sorry.
Yeah, I think it's better now.
It's better now. So sorry. So I was saying education in the first industrial revolution and in the fourth industrial revolution are completely different. And I think what we currently have in our country, with the way our education is set up, is that we're still somehow in the first industrial revolution, somewhere between the first and the second. We're still like moving, but like education has really, really moved on from the first all the way to the fourth. And I'll explain to you why. So in the first industrial revolution, the learning objectives used to be like mastery of basic skills like reading, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and stuff.
We can't hear you again.
I'm back. Okay. So I was talking about development of the whole person, right? And that sometimes you talk about like emotional intelligence as being one of the factors. But we don't learn emotional intelligence in school, right? So they talk about financial literacy, for example. They don't add that kind of thing in school. Focus on things like how do you like know theories and how do you like read and how do you count. So education has moved beyond that. Also, most of our educators in Nigeria still see themselves as experts. But you can't be experts in the world of ChatGPT. Who knows more than ChatGPT, for example? Like who really does know? Is it possible to read that much? I don't even think it's humanly possible to read and know that much, to know how to have all this kind of information. So as a facilitator, as an educator, your role has moved from being the expert in quotes to being a facilitator of conversation. And I'm sure Nicholas will tell you, like in most like advanced schools, right? Most lecturers just come through a question and you guys discuss. It's like a discussion. Those who are discussing their own perspectives, and through that conversation, people begin to learn things, insights from different countries and different experiences. So that's what education in the fourth industrial revolution actually is going to be. So that's also something as well that we need to note in our own education. Also, the experience of the learner is also not like a factory model, because the way schools were built during the colonial era, right? And they were built at the time where the idea was to produce so many versions of one thing. That was the conveyor belts principle, right? Like, how do I produce many versions of one particular thing? So if I'm producing an engineer, how do I have 100 engineers? So use that same system, teach all of you the same thing, cram the same thing, have the same exam, and actually go through the system. But education has actually moved. It's moved from just being that factory model to being, how can it be even self-directed, so that I'm learning what I want to learn at a particular time, because you'll be passionate about a particular thing based on what your interest is, right? So if I'm interested, for example, in biomimicry, when I did in 2022, I wanted to learn biomimicry, but I didn't want to do like a bachelor's in biomimicry. I just wanted to learn biomimicry, right? And I found out that there was a program on that. There was a 6-month program on biomimicry, and they're like, you can learn this, you get a global certificate at the end of it. And I enrolled in that program and I learned that for that time. And I was passionate about it, and I finished it. So it was self-directed. I didn't have to go through a particular system to actually finish that stuff. Again, it's also not as it's not age bound. It's also like lifelong learning, like I mentioned earlier, because you really cannot stop learning. In this era. Maybe before now, maybe you had maybe in the second industrial revolution, you had this is to say, if you're a professor, you've gotten to that height. But now knowledge is not just in books, it's everywhere. So you have to keep learning, and things are changing really fast. So how do you keep learning and keep growing in that same manner as well? And then the access to that is, again, before now, learning used to be only in classrooms, but I mean, as we can see with COVID-19 and everything, learning has gone from just being a physical space to being everywhere. So there are people who have done programs, and as you see in my story as well, who have done full bachelor's programs, full educational programs from not even ever going to that university physically, but they've learned online and they finished that and had certifications. So I think just being able to pick out what it is you want to do, and knowing that there are no more limits. We don't have to be physically. The physical limitation is taken away. I think that's also something that we have to keep in mind. So that's how my story kind of like begins, because so there's something in Nigeria that I call the 75% trap, and I think that trap actually still exists currently, even though like currently we had a very terrible like gross average performance in JAMB, which I think worsens things actually, because like it becomes very very competitive now, right? But there's data that shows from Courts Africa that shows that only 1 in 4 people that apply for admission in university gets admission into university. So if you have 4 people apply for a particular university, a particular course, only 1 of them will actually get in. So if you look at the trend from 2010 to 2015, you've had millions and millions of people apply, and maybe just like 30%, 15%, 20% that eventually go into university. So nearly 75% of people do not actually get into school every year. And I think there's so many causes for this particular issue. One of them is that we have few institutions. In Nigeria, we have about 171 tertiary institutions, and this is like plus polytechnics and colleges and everything. And our population has, well, I mean, which other population are we going to follow now? They say we are over 180 million people. We've not done a census in 17 years, right? But let's say we are like 200 million people, 180 to 200 million people.
150 now.
150 million, okay.
250 now.
Okay, 250. Okay, 250 million people, and you have 171 institutions. Obviously, there'll be a lot of competition for that, right? But if you compare that to the US has 320 million people, but they have 5,000 institutions, right? So if you wonder why the US will not have this kind of 75% issue, it's actually because they have a lot of institutions to handle. But my solution is not that Nigeria should have more institutions yet, because I don't think we even can take care of the ones that we have. So let's not just go and start creating a lot more new ones that we don't have resources to even handle, right? But that's actually one of the reasons why. Also, another reason will be that there's always a contest for the sciences. People are always trying to get to the sciences. There's corruption in the admission process. There's also a growing population. We have 62% of our population is under 24 years. So that's a huge youth bulge. So there's a lot of people that want to get to university, and most of them will actually not get into university because of this particular challenge. So I was actually one of these people between 2000 and I finished secondary school in 2007. So between 2007 and 2011, I think I wrote JAMB like 4 times, and it was not because I was failing JAMB. It was just because I was not able to just get into school for some strange reason, right? And I think as a kid, I was like a very, according to my like uncles and parents, right? Even like in church too, growing up in children's church, my teachers will always say, you're always very curious, often ask a lot of questions, sometimes annoying questions, but just always talking and asking questions, right? And so I like getting to this stage in my life, I started to ask myself questions to say like, what exactly do I want to do with my life? Because I was at this stage where most of my secondary school mates, I think, who were able to get into university then, were like at their 3rd year or their 4th year, so like most of them were almost done with school, and I was still like trying to get into school. So I said to myself, like, what do I really want to do with my life? To not just to break away from this 75% trap, but I think also to learn more about like my purpose. And that's when I started to learn things about like purpose, driven life, started to read books, started to find out that, like there's a reason why we're all here on earth, right? We're not just here to just like be born, go choose whatever course and go through school and come out and have children and die one day and they eat our burial rice. There's actually a reason why we're all here. Each person has a particular gifting, and it's a reason why you're born in a particular place and a particular country and those kind of things. So I started to find out all of these things, and I think that's what helped me to sort of find out that, like as a kid, I've always loved to write. So why did I go into school to do something that is not in line with what I've always had the passion for? I've had it, like, even when I was in secondary school, I was in the science classes, but I was like head of press club, in secondary school, right? So there's always that pointer that maybe you should be doing something else. But I think just because like I'm from River State, my parents have always like said that, as someone from River State, you should work in an oil company, right? Which is what we often hear, right? Plan to work in an oil company, so that you can have money, take care of your siblings. I have four siblings, so take care of your siblings, and I'm the first child. So obviously there's always that kind of pressure. So I think that pressure is real, and it's going to happen now. It's still happening today. And I think sadly we might even have a reverse version of that pressure with all of the exploits we see people doing in the arts. Soon people will start forcing their kids to get into the arts, go and do football, go and learn music, there's that group thing and peer pressure, right? But I think in the midst of all of that thing, I think what I learned is that it's very important to actually find out what your purpose is. And that if you actually do figure out what you're really passionate about and you take time to develop yourself in it, you really can do really, really well. Like you have a huge potential to go far in what comes to you naturally than anything else. Like it's possible to learn anything and do well in it if you work hard, right? In quotes. But I think there's a higher potential of going really, really far. If you're passionate about something and you build your skills in it, you would go really, really far. And I think that for me, that has been like definitely my own story, right? Throughout my own career. And so I sort of like, looking back now, I can see what the model is. At the time, I didn't have a clue of what I was doing. I was just thinking of, how can I find mentors? How can I get into programs, get into like colleges or things that I can do quickly? How can I build certain skills? But I think this is like a model that I have now created based on what I was doing back in the time that I think has been useful to me. So first, and I mentioned this earlier, is being able to focus on building a particular set of skill at a particular time. So if I'm passionate about a particular thing, I learn that thing at that time and I use it. And then I learn something else and I eventually use it. So I'm often not just learning things for just learning sake. Like I'm learning things I want to use quickly. So like even when I was learning like basic programming, it was because at the time I was working somewhere where they needed to build a website and they didn't have money to pay for a website developer. So I went to learn how to build a website as someone who was working there and eventually built it for the organization, right? So learning things that you can use quickly. And I think that's agility, like being able to be agile, right? Then also I've had a mixture of both like online and offline learning as well. So I've never been like limited by physical space. So whatever program it is that I want to learn, as far back as 2013-ish, I'll be writing to like some professors at Harvard and still telling them like, oh, do you have like coursework or program or course book really that you can share online? I remember this guy I emailed one time to say if you can share his course book, and he was really shocked. He was like, can we have that time was Skype. He was like, can we do a Skype call? I would really like to meet you, because he was shocked as to how I had the courage to just like email him from randomly out of Nigeria. Like, who are you? Are you like a Nigerian prince or something? Are you trying to scam me or something? And I think just going through that phase of being able to want to learn things and going out there to learn them, I think was basically that. And having practical experience to back my theoretical concept also was very useful too, because I didn't wait to like get into school and finish school before I started working. I started working when I was 17 years old. That's in 2010. That was around the time I was doing jam back and forth. So I had so much time on my hands. I started to learn things. I started to like question things. So I'd apply for one of those roles as someone like an early reporter for a particular online media platform. And they surprisingly they hired me. I think I was getting like $50 per article or something like that I was writing then. So yeah, I mean, and they pay me Western Union and stuff like that then. It was such a big deal to me, right? And so yeah, just being able to get into that. And so what I was learning like about media and journalism, I was practicing it in real time, not waiting to finish. I think that was also very quite useful to me. I think that's something we need to also like adapt in the educational sector. And then also I learned like soft skills too, because like I had to start fending for myself really quite early, so like financial skills. I have so many younger siblings, so I can't really like, there's nobody for me to go and ask for money, right? So I mean, I have to make my own money. I also take care of them, right? And I also had to learn like time management. And that's why like, I don't think there's any country I'll go to that I'll not be able to like bend to their system, right? Because like, these are the kind of soft skills that everyone needs to operate in a working system, so being able to multitask, being able to speak in public about whatever it is you're working on, being able to do certain things. I think these are like very, very useful skills. Another very useful one, I think, is also like being able to build a professional network. And I think like LinkedIn had been a very useful tool to me in this regard. Like I feel like I have on my LinkedIn, I have like 10,000 people, but I think I know close to like 2,000 or 3,000 people on that. And when I say I know, like I mean I know them. Like I'm not saying like I just know their names. Like I know them. I've either had something to do with them, or we've shared something before in the past, or maybe worked in a particular organization, or been fellows together on something, or been on one program together or something like most people actually have some kind of personal thing with them, you know. And I think that that's been very useful to me because in the professional space, right? Like contrary to what they often tell us, that it's just like get a great degree or get a great result and jobs will chase you. Like it doesn't work that way, right? I'm sure most of you know this. Like nobody really cares about this thing. Like most times people even just work with recommendations. Like there's an oil company, there's an organization that works in the oil and gas space that called me. One of my friends that called me, sent me saying, I don't have time to put this information online. I really need someone who has this particular skill. You just send me this thing now, I will just employ them. Like I don't have time, And I was like, what do you mean you don't have time? Like it's not like procurement law to put that. She's like, please, I don't care about procurement law. I really need someone to really do this thing quickly, and I will just hire the person quickly. And I recommended a couple of people to hire. And that's how most of the like jobs and opportunities happen. Like there's so much like recommendation. People are just often there to just like recommend people for like certain things. But you have to first build your network, people to even know you and know what you actually do. And yeah, it's a good place also connect with like role models and mentors as well, people who will be able to help guide you based on their time commitment. I mean, don't write to every single person saying you want them to be your mentor, so that you don't become a disturbance. But yeah, if you find a particular person or a couple of people who you think like share values and everything, yeah, reach out to them, and I think it's a good thing for you to have. Some people might say no, but yeah, just reach out. There's no harm in trying. I think that's one thing I've learned over the past decade plus, that there's really no harm in trying. Just ask. Nobody's going to kill you if you ask. So yeah, so just to wrap up, this timeline kind of like just shows how my education. So after the JAMB era, I got into University College of Arts and Science, then went to the Alpha Institute of Broadcasting and Communication, then went to International Institute of Journalism in Abuja. So these were the 3 physical programs that I did after JAMB. Everything else was virtual. Some I eventually had to go physically, but everything else was virtual, like virtual programs. The Harvard program that I got a scholarship for was fully virtual. Yeah, Oxford University is virtual, obviously, as you guys know. The MIT MicroMasters program is virtual. London School of Journalism is virtual. Like I eventually went there physically to London, but it was not because of the program. Like I'd already finished and graduated from the program before I eventually went there. The School of Arts at Stanford was fully virtual as well. So everything, like it's possible to build skills, right? With the fundamental revision, it's possible to build all these things with virtual learning, right? I know really like because of how expensive these programs can actually be, you get a very hugely subsidized cost for a virtual program, right? And you can still learn. Like nothing should limit you. I'm not saying like you should not aspire to learn physically, right? But I'm saying if you get to a situation where you cannot access it, nothing should ever limit you. Like you can still learn from the best programs and best minds everywhere in the world, right? It just depends on how much you want to get it. So yeah, so between then, I think this basically just shows like my work map, and again you would see that it all connects, like if you also do this for your own career, you find out that it actually all does connect. It's because you were here that led to here, and then led to here, and then this led to here. Even the work I've done with university government was because I was doing some work with WEF and the Global Shapers community at the time. When I got the fellowship for the Nigerian Economic Summit Group was because I was working at PIND, work we were doing at PIND at the time, working with state governments in the 9 states in the Niger Delta region. Yeah, and then I was working at Chain.org. I recently just joined Google Activities. It was because I was here that I eventually got the role here. So everything connects. That's why I think that is important. One of the things I always remember here is that it's important to actually really just build bridges. The people skills we mentioned earlier. It's actually important to actually just build bridges because like you really never know where your in quote recommendation would come from. Like you don't know who is watching you, who is listening to you, who's following you on LinkedIn or who is checking out the work you're doing. So it's important to actually just continue to build bridges and continue to like expand your network, all of the work that you basically do. Nicholas will also tell you this as well. There's so many opportunities for us who are young people. I think that this is one of the best times to be a young person in the existence of humanity, because there's so many opportunities, and in form of like scholarships and grants and fellowships and all those things that are out there for people who are interested. So I would say, like, don't limit yourself. Like, apply for things. Like, do you understand? Like, I'm not saying just spend your time applying for things alone and lying on your application, but like when you do the work, like don't limit yourself, because there are people who lie on the application, obviously. But don't limit yourself. Like, put yourself out there. Don't feel like you have to be special to get certain things, like you don't have to be special. All of this, I was checking this out this morning. All of these red dots are basically like the countries I've traveled to, and these are I've not had to like pay for any of these trips. Like all of these have just been like either organizations I'm consulting for, or their fellowship programs, or their, like, I don't know, like grants things, or like meetings and stuff like that. Like all of these have always been paid for by people. So imagine and there are people who have accessed a lot more opportunities than this. This is even small. There are people who have done, I don't know, 70, 30, 80 countries, by opportunities. So there's so many opportunities out there. So I think as a young person, don't dull yourself, don't limit yourself. There's so much out there that you can definitely access. And I'm wishing you all the best as you apply for that. And there are books, there are resources that you can read if you want to learn more about how you can apply for these things. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you. So it's